Can I have whose number ends in 6483 announce themselves?
Yeah, this is Matthew Bryan with the City of Phoenix Water. I'm also on the computer as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our March meeting. Hard to believe we're in March. Here we go. Our March meeting for the MAG Standard Details and Specifications Committee. We will we'll go ahead. We've got at least one visitor here in person with us today and one person online. We'll go ahead and ask them to do just a brief introduction. And we'll start with Alex, who's here with us in person.
You have Alex Carter here. Alex Carter with Vulcan Materials. I'm here to, assist in presenting a couple cases.
Thank you, Alex. And Eric, I believe that you've joined us today. And if you want to do a quick introduction.
Yeah, hi. Eric Bonds. I'm a civil engineer with the City of Tempe Water Department. Here to present a case.
Eric, do you know if are you filling as a proxy today,
For Bashir,
or is he going to join us later?
he should be here now.
Oh, I see him. He just popped up. Thank you.
You're right.
Eric, thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, and I think everyone else that's online is understanding here in person, our usual committee members. So we'll move on to our agenda item number 2, which is the call to the audience. And this is an opportunity that will be provided to members of the public to provide input through written comment to the Standard Specifications and Details Committee on items that are not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of MAG, or on items on the agenda for discussion but not for action. Members of the public are asked to submit written comments related to this meeting through the MAG website at www.azmag.gov/comment and indicate for which meeting the comment is intended. Comments may be sent at any time leading up to the meeting, but must be received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time for the meeting. Comments received prior to the deadline will be read aloud during the meeting. Comments may also be provided in person. Comments must not exceed 3 minutes in length. A total of 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the chair of the Standard Specifications and Details Committee requests an exception to this limit. Please note that comments received for agenda items posted for action will be read at the time the item is heard. To attend the meeting by technological means, members of the public may access the link to watch a video stream on the MAG website by clicking on the "This meeting is available to watch online" link provided at the azmag.gov website. Gordon, did we have any comments for today's meeting?
None were received prior to the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go on to agenda item number 3 then, approval of the February 1st, 2023 meeting minutes. We'll go ahead, Gordon can scroll through that. Hopefully you've had a chance to review those. And when we're done scrolling through it here, if you can gather your thoughts, and we'll go ahead and entertain a motion if there's no comments or requests for modifications. Okay, are there any comments or questions on the meeting minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Ryan, I'll make a motion to approve as written.
Thank you, Dan.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Craig. Okay, let's go ahead and do a roll call vote. And Gordon, do you want to take us through that?
Sure, let me, look at the voting sheet. Okay. Starting with City of Avondale. Kim, are you here yet? All right, let's move on to Buckeye.
As a yes.
Handler,
Yes.
El Mirage,
Yes.
Gilbert,
Yes.
Glendale,
Yes.
Goodyear,
Yes.
Maricopa County,
Yes.
Mesa,
Yes.
Peoria,
Yes.
Phoenix,
Yes.
Scottsdale,
Yes.
Surprise,
Yes.
Tempe,
Yes.
Youngtown. Youngtown's not present. Thirteen yes, 2 not present.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item number 4, outside right-of-way document. And this is an item for discussion here or a presentation. And we've had a few different meetings in the past where we've talked about potential cases and different items. And at this point, I think the goal is to have a little more discussion on what the form of maybe the separate document that will be including details and or specifications that are not ones that typically fit within the standard right-of-way details and specifications, and what that form might be. Peter, are you online to lead this discussion?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
So, yes, and thank you, Aaron. That's exactly where we're at this point. Much of the work prior to this, the working group products have been directly input into what we fondly call the Blue Book. Now we're at that stage that we're starting to have items that really are not going to be in the right of way, adjacent to the right of way, part of elements that are agencies would have, say, parking lots, buildings, city buildings, golf courses, parks, things like that, or adjacent to it that some great interest to the or involve the right of way. So we're now at that stage. We really have to kind of make some decisions of where that that document or that information is going to reside. Today, we actually do have a case, probably the first one that really deals just with that it's going to be discussed. So again, prior to this, a few years ago, we actually we came up with kind of a forward, and one of the things that it talked about in there was that we're talking about, I think we actually got it. We talked about having kind of a draft of what would this be encompassing? What are we talking about here? And again, they're dealing with on-site development that's not associated with the right of way. So I resurrected the prior description that we had for your information as much as comment and review. So we can kind of start looking at how do we want to deal with this. These would be supplements, of course. And a lot of the idea of this was that we would be able to take supplements that agencies were using. They wouldn't have to have their supplements anymore and that are dealing with these specific topics. So we're really to the point where now we're having to come up with how do we want these to exist as we have these cases moving forward. And I wanted to solicit opinions of the agencies, of the members of the committee, see if we could try to come up with how we want to do this. The current cases that we're focused on right now are heavily involved with the low impact development, LID infrastructure and other agency specific details that several MAG agencies are using. We're not coming up with really a lot of new territory. It's stuff that's really been out there that's been in fragmented pieces that we're putting together. The draft forward I went through, and some of the cases that we're going to be talking about, especially today, is the vegetated rock bioswale section and details. Tempe is sponsoring the retention basin spillway connection. We did the siltation containment before. Now we've got the basin sub detention tanks, which have been in various pieces, and it's being put together more comprehensive. City of Phoenix is actually, Keith Cassidy with the City of Phoenix is working on that. I'm working on dry wells, domed overflow structures we've wanted for a while. They've been in pieces in different sections. Of course, we've looked at before thermoplastic bodied PVC catch basins. And then another one that I think it really ties to a number of the LID projects are infiltration trenches. We just need to establish now some kind of format and numbering and how we're going to go about this. So I want to open that up for thoughts on the committee and what you would, how do you want this to live in the system?
Hey, Peter, this is Warren. I just read through this draft word. It sounds really good to me. One thought in this is, I don't know if we wanted to add a sentence in here similar to what the intent is on the public rights of way side. Is this is also to establish some potential uniformity in standards as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know if we wanted to include maybe that statement too or not.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point because we're trying to get rid of that fragmentation. Thank you. And one of the thoughts we had was that it would be, now that we live in the electronic age, it's kind of nice because you can have it as a separate document. I know there was concern that this would not be a document that would necessarily go for approval. This would be pretty much a wholly owned document by this committee. So you kind of have a lot of freedom on how you want to do this.
So we continue to call this the outside of right-of-way working group and outside of right-of-way details. Has the committee brainstormed different ideas for what the document itself might be called?
As you see on the forward, the only thing we've ever talked about are public works construction outside the right-of-way. That's been the working title, I guess, for quite some time.
Does anyone have a clever idea that they're wanting to propose for the name?
Right, I was just thinking about that too. In that, I think in our worlds they refer to on-site and off-site, right? On-site development and off-site is technically in public rights of way, but that is included in that first paragraph, on-site development. So I can't think of anything better yet than the way Peter has it.
Yeah, we can put in, that's why I added that one paragraph that we did have in there. We talked about it one time saying that they focus on agency development work in areas outside the public right of way and up to 5 feet to the face of buildings where building standards control. We could add something like that into the forward, what we actually call the document. I'm not sure.
I kind of like the word, as you've stated in the first sentence there, it's a supplement to the uniform standard specifications for public works construction. I kind of like supplement, using the word supplement or something along those lines, supplementary details to kind of differentiate that they're not the standard details, if you will, for public works. So something along those lines.
Okay.
Supplementary details for on-site development or something along those lines. I'm doing my synonym search. We got a complementary as another option. I don't know.
I do kind of like the word supplementary because that's really what what each agency calls their package that's outside of MAG. So this would actually be a package within MAG that would be a supplementary document.
Yeah, and then we put the burden on the agencies because they'll have the supplements to the supplementary document.
Well, hopefully not. The whole idea is that they wouldn't have to have supplements to the supplement, that they would be able to use this as their freeboard to put those kinds of things together.
And that's a good point. That is one of the major goals is,
Yeah.
I think a lot of cities do probably have details or standards or specifications right now in their supplements that are there because they don't fall into this category of details and specifications we have currently. So again, it might help to reduce the size and number of supplements that the agencies are utilizing.
Yes. That would be a hopeful goal of it. I mean, there's going to be situations where you're going to have to supplement for something that MAG is doing that the agency really wants to do very differently, and that really wouldn't fit in here. It is part of the within the right of way that has to have a supplement to it. But I think hopefully we wouldn't have to have supplements to these supplements.
So what is the thought? Is the document intended to be a series of both specifications and details?
Correct.
Okay. And then, so I guess the other big question is I think format wise, it makes sense to follow the structure of the documents that we've already got in place. And maybe other people have different ideas, but I'm guessing that's probably the reasonable path forward. And we've talked about a couple of the ideas in the past, but just to bring them back up for further discussion, if people have ideas or on it, aside from the document name, but the second thing is how do we number or identify the details to differentiate them from the current standards, specifications, and details, yet be in a similar format. And I think one of the things we've discussed in the past is, of course, the MAG details are numbered, but they don't have any prefixes necessarily. A lot of the agencies are using prefixes. And I think that was one of the things that we discussed potentially for these supplementary details is using prefixes so as to differentiate them. The other thing I think we talked about was going completely outside of the numbering system we currently have and using a completely different number so as there's not any confusion with that. So I'd like to, and Peter, I guess you probably have already asked this question for feedback on that, but I'd like to dial in on those two things and see if members of the committee have any suggestions or comments or feedback on those two items specifically.
Is there something that somebody would not want to see? For example, an agency that has their supplements that have done something similar but added a number in front, or their specific a letter or something like that. We wouldn't want to have confusion with existing city supplements. So maybe that's another way to look at it. What shouldn't we do?
Well, I think this Jim Badowich, the prefixes are good, but they could backfire, and it's more difficult for other cities to maybe implement a reciprocal, if they have a supplement, because then now you got to come up with something different. It might clash. What about if we jump to like a 1100 series or 1200, just go to 4 numbers for this series? I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
That way other cities, if they have a supplement to it, they can just put their prefix in front of it and the number would stay the same.
True.
And Peter, this is more than just a thought on this, as most agencies have the supplements that we're talking about right now. For example, dry wells are part of our 500 series that fits into the drainage series. So, which makes sense, keeping them grouped in the appropriate area, even though they're outside of the right of way. So just a thought on that.
Yeah, and I do kind of like the idea of having parallel number systems, adding it into maybe 1000 series, having the 4th number in the front end. Maybe that's a better solution, but we keep the last ones as fitting in with the current formatting.
Are you saying, for example, like dry wells would
like
be
dry wells, for example.
5,000, maybe 5,000 to match the current, or I'm sorry, 4,000 to match the current drainage
Well, I'm thinking the other way around. Say it's a 500 series, you'd still have a 500, but there would be a number in front of that.
Okay, okay.
I think that's okay. Well, I think I'd want to preserve the thousands for if there's ever a need to continue to expand on the current standard details. I don't know if we'll ever go that high since we're not that high now, but if we're going to add it up the front, we could jump a few.
Yeah. See, Eric's got a question or a comment.
Yeah, so most of you guys know that, cities like Tempe have a prefix of a T. So T 450 is a standard that we have. So I think that Chandler and others do the same, at least they used to. However, ADOT also has a couple different standards that they use. Their B series is for bridges and that kind of stuff, right? So more information.
Thank you.
I'm not sure, but I think some city supplements may have a 1 in front, like 1,200 or whatever. I can't remember which one, but another thought I had is that, if you put a prefix, I was thinking, well, O for outside might work, but then I thought again, and it looks like a 0. So that's probably not a good prefix number. So, letter.
Would it be beneficial if for the next meeting, I'll just go through all of the agency supplements and see how they do number those and just give you a document that says this is what they all look like right now. Maybe it'll make it easier for us to make a decision.
Yeah, Peter, I think that's a good idea. It sounds like the committee wants you to do all the work, so.
So this is Roy. I was just going to throw out there. I don't know if adding O, kind of like what Gordon's saying, OR maybe for outside right away, maybe as a prefix. I know maybe that's going to start to get long if you get high numbers. Then I agree with what Ryan mentioned, whether we maybe jump to a 5,000 series or something to give us some room, some expansion room, so that hopefully at some point in the future we would never overlap one another.
I think we got nothing used for 800s or 900s, so there's room for expansion there before we get jumped to thousands.
Okay, Peter, so I think I like your idea. If you'll go ahead and organize a list of how the agencies currently have their supplements. Like I know Mesa's M- with before our detail number. I'm sure there's a lot of other agencies similar. So if you put together that list, we can at least rule out what we don't want.
Yep.
And hopefully go from there.
Okay.
One last comment this morning. Peter, when you're looking at that too in other agencies, ideally, there are definitely some areas in MAG that we may want to develop in the future. Like right now, we have no street lights or traffic signals, for example. I don't know if we wanted to preserve areas for those or not in the public rights of way and not use up those particular areas. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think we have to realize there has to be opportunities for growth in the existing documents and recognize that has to be taken into consideration. Obviously, we just added the landscape details.
Yeah.
Add the new numbering system. So yes, I think that's a good caveat to put on this. Okay, well, that gives me some direction. I can put that together and then we can we can carry cases forward without knowing what they're going to be numbered or lettered yet, but we at least know what they are.
Great. Thank you for all your efforts on that.
Okay, very good.
We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 5. These are items that are proposed to be heard and cases under consideration. So starting with case 22-15, add new subsection 718.4 solar reflective coatings, add reference in section 334. And so this item is for information and discussion. Kelly, are you on the line? And I know you're working with others in Phoenix. Is there some discussion or any information you want to provide on this case today?
We don't have any new information. I know that Ryan forwarded out a memo we had on some discussion from last time that cleared up some of the issues we had with the solar reflective material. But we're definitely open for any new questions anyone has on the case.
Okay, yeah. So members of the committee, are there additional questions that you have that, and again, understanding that Kelly may need to go back and discuss with other city staff, but if we can provide those questions either now, happy to hear them now, or if there's other discussion on it, we can do that now. Otherwise, I'm sure Kelly would appreciate any.
With this in or out. I can't hear out of this.
Is that right?
Paul, I think you should be muted or you're picking up some. Thank you.
Okay, any questions or discussion for this case, for this meeting today? Okay, not hearing any. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 6, which is case 23-01, miscellaneous corrections. We have a few different corrections and that we've proposed that are listed on here. Item A, section 41.5, change to Arizona Highway Department. Change Arizona Highway Department to Arizona Department of Transportation. Section 102.10, delete the portion that refers to Telegram from this section. And item C, remove reference to manhole steps in section 605.4, 610.8, and table 771-1. Are there any questions or comments on these miscellaneous corrections? Or are there any other miscellaneous corrections that people would like to add? Okay, easy enough. Let's move on to agenda item number 7. Case 23-02, revised section 725, Portland Cement Concrete. And this is, we had a presentation previously, but I guess this is our first meeting where this is a proposed case. So we'll go ahead and turn some time over to our group here. I think Alex, Jeff, and Greg, and we'll turn the time over and they'll go ahead and lead us in some information on this case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll see in your packet the proposed language revisions, case 2302, the addition to 725, particularly 725.2, where we've added the 2 blended cements that we discussed, had the presentation on at the last standards meeting. Portland limestone cement and ternary blended cement, basically mirroring pretty much what the Portland Poslum cement that's already in there is. You can see that I also took one phrase off the end of that where no other specific type is specified. I'm not even sure what that means. I don't know that we need that any longer. You either specify the type or you don't. Now that we're going to add some other potential blended cements on there, we should probably take that off so that we can make sure that everyone knows exactly what they're using in their mixes. At the working group meeting on the 16th of last month, I stumbled through, to the best of my ability, the presentation that was made at the last standards committee meeting, slides and so on that we had. There were really no questions or concerns or discussion about it at the standards committee meeting. Nobody seemed to want to do that. So after the presentation, we moved on. I guess at this point for the committee, I don't know. I would encourage you to now that we have an official case and have language to look at, to take it back to your groups, your various groups who want to have input into this. And certainly we can have further discussions at the working group meetings. If we need to have individual discussions with the individual agency staffs, we could certainly arrange to do that too. We can do just about anything to provide additional information, education, whatever on the 2 products.
So Jeff, a quick question for you. And I'm trying to remember back to the presentation. I'm a little slow. So I appreciate you indulging my
You're right.
questions.
It's pretty new.
So designers often are just specifying concrete and they may specify the class of concrete, either AA, A, B, or C. But usually they don't go into a whole lot of other details and they just refer to the MAG specification. So just confirming, my understanding was if the specification called for a class A concrete per this specification, essentially that will dictate the minimum cementitious material. It'll dictate the minimum compressive strength as shown here in the specification, but it doesn't automatically dictate whether it's Portland pozzolan cement or Portland lime cement. And at that point, it's really open to either. The part you struck there in the first section, Portland pozzolan cement, says if nothing specified, that's basically the default. It has to be Portland pozzolan. So striking that out, we are truly saying, as long as you meet this class of concrete, which can be done with either type, any type, it really does leave it, unless the designer has a preference and specifies one specific type. But in the absence of that, it is open to any of those, I guess, three types now, right? The Portland lime cement, ternary blended cement, or the standard, previously standard Portland pozzolan cement. Is that understanding correct?
Actually, Ryan, I would say that the default that is normally used in the Phoenix market area, certainly in Maricopa County, is ASTM C150 type 2.5 cements is really what's used. When it comes to a blended cement, the only other thing that's been available has been the 1P product. So to me, it didn't make sense to have that extra information there on Portland pozzolan, because that was the only other thing. That almost led us to believe that is the default cement that most people are using, and it isn't. It's C150 type 2.5 is what they're actually.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the clarification, because
I don't know.
yeah,
we probably should have done something with that a long time ago. It doesn't, even without making these changes, that doesn't really make sense, because that really isn't the default.
I think the first sentence after the cementitious materials heading needs to be updated, because right now it's saying you can only use those two.
You're correct.
Previous versions.
We should change that to be or blended cement, either Portland cement or blended hydraulics. Change that. You're right. That's the reason we put a case out there, so we can get things right. We can make that change. That's easy. But yeah, I don't think that we need that phrase in there on that second. It doesn't really, that's not really what the case is. There are a number of people in the valley that are using 1P cement in their mixes, but the vast majority of people currently right now would be using C150 type 2.
Yeah, and actually that's what I was thinking I was saying, but obviously I wasn't.
That's really not the way I would read this, though. When no other specific type is specified, you'd say, okay, well, that would be the thing that most people are using. You'd have to ask for type 2 if you wanted something different, because this would have been the default. And that's not really the case at this point.
Right. So in specifying a class B concrete, really now it'll be open to 4 types of cement being used to create that concrete.
And it would be mixed design then specific. Certainly mixed designs would show which, just like it shows which aggregates, shows which admixtures, it would show which of the cement types you'd be using.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that clarification. Other questions or comments?
Right, I'm gonna piggyback on your question. So our default right now, to completely make this crystal clear, because I'm slower than Ryan is we will use the ASTM C150 type 2. That's basically the default, where type 5 is also there. Allowable, use that. And now we're saying, okay, type 2, type 5, type 3 still in there also, but we're also going to throw in the pozzolan, limestone, or the blended versions of it. So basically we've got, thinking of a format, hydraulic cement shall consist of either of the following four and number them 1, 2, 3, and 4. That would make sense at all. Because it wasn't clear until the question just came up that there is now 4. I mean, I didn't read it as that, but there definitely is 4 options. So the ASTM 150 is 1, Portland Pozzolan is number 2, and Limestone would be number 3, and Attorney and 4. That makes sense.
We could reword that a first paragraph to say hydraulic cement shall consist of either ASTM C150 Portland cement or C595 blended hydraulics. And that would cover both of the specification requirements. C150 would certainly is where you would find type 3 and type 5 and the other requirements on it. There's several variations within that theme. And then you'd have several variations in the blended hydraulics without having to go down through a list of 8 different cements you could.
Okay, right. Okay. Just a thought. I mean, as the question came up, that kind of made me give a little bit more clarity here.
Is there any circumstances in which 2 different types of cement may be used in a concrete mix design? Or should it always be one or the other?
Well, your mix design submittals will say which product is being used, again,
Right.
just as you would.
There's no reason not to mix 2 types of cement.
I don't see an instance where someone would use both.
Right. I don't either, but I just want to make sure there's not a reason why it shouldn't be done.
I don't know if there's a reason why it shouldn't be done. I don't know of anybody who's done it, but
Well,
I understand what you're saying. I do
someone will be
understand
the
what you're
first.
saying. As we talked about earlier, right? Giving people options.
Well, and just because that first sentence, the way it's written, says hydraulic cement shall consist of
Either.
either this or that. And the way you reworded it was fine, I think, to provide more information. The other option is hydraulic cement shall consist of one of the following, and then you've got the 4 different types listed out.
You'll see though that, and you guys probably have recognized this, over time, the local cement producers have started to make a one size fits all kind of cement already. We don't, the locally available materials meet type 2 and type 5 requirements. It used to be they didn't do that. So if you really needed that high sulfate resistance that would be required from a type 5 cement, you'd have to ask for that kind of thing. But over time, we've just kind of started to make it easier as possible by making them, and that's not abnormal in the ASTM world to have a product meet more than one standard kind of thing. So you could broaden the amount of uses it might have. Let me take another stab at that first sentence and see if I can't make it more universal. But still,
Hey Jeff, in those lines, what's your thought on when you revisit that first sentence, something of the following? I mean, that where we would then have those 4 items below, maybe have them broken out as A, B, C, D. So would that be more clear, do you think? Just so we don't think there's separate paragraphs related to the first ones, just for more singling them out.
Well, that first,
Unless I'm missing something.
I guess ASTM C150 always had 2, 3, or 4, and those were all always together. So if you said ASTM C150 or ASTM C595,
we could do it. We could absolutely do it that way. We could make it 2 separate things. You can make Portland Pozzolan cement mean C1. I'm sorry, Portland cement meeting requirement is C150 for type 2, 3, or 4 or 5. I'm sorry, and then Portland. Then we could say blended hydraulic cements meeting ASTM C595 1P Portland limestone or 1T. We could do it that way. That way those are within each one of the ASTM specifications, just different variations within the specification.
I had just said something to Gordon by email that was from the Port Cement Association that does just what you're just talking about. I was just gonna see if you could put it up there. That's exactly what they did. They show the C-150 and then the C-595 and classify within those.
That will be a better way.
I think regardless that those four types that are listed, there's four paragraphs that follow that first sentence. And those four paragraphs apply to that first sentence, but the fifth paragraph doesn't. So whether it's indenting those four, something to show that those are.
We could number them. We could number them A, B. We could number 1, 2. We could do whatever. We could delineate.
Right.
And even if you don't want numbers or letters, just a bullet.
Right. Bullet point them.
Bullet points, indentions, whatever, something.
And the thought on that is, let's say that the C-150, that's number 1. So that's the most important. Might not, the numbering, and I start thinking about it, might not be the best way.
Good point.
Yes. No problem. I'll massage you to make it look better and get it
I think it's a pretty good first draft.
pretty simple. This isn't very hard, honestly. We just got to get it so that everybody understands what the differences are. And again, gentlemen, the idea here is to again give alternatives as we start thinking more, and we're getting more and more. I'm sure that you guys in the cities are already talking about these things. Carbon reduction, greenhouse gas reductions, environmental things. We need to have more and more options in this area for us to be able to reduce those impacts on the environment if we can. The feds are moving that way strongly, very strongly, and so many federal funds come into the city for use and so on. I anticipate there'll be requirements attached to those funds that will need us to have these kinds of alternatives also.
I'm just going to assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we are looking based on that statement, based on the presentation, that our cements, our concretes that are coming out will be with either a 1L or 1T or a 1L or 1T type cement.
I will tell you that Craig, I will tell you that other parts of the country, other states, other parts of the country, that is the predominant cement that is now available. ASTM C-150 cements are not available. They've been switched to a blended cement product for that very reason, to be more environmentally friendly and still maintain high levels of performance.
Well, and also for yours and for mine, just dig it in a little deeper. Performance, there is no difference. Or slight.
I'm going to tell you that not all cements are made the same. Not all pozzolans are made. Not all admixtures, are made the same. There'll be some slight differences from regions, but within a region, it doesn't appear that that's been the experience that I'm seeing from other parts of the country. And if you read the PCA stuff they put out, and you read some of the stuff that's put out by the Canadian Cement Association, they've been doing this for over a decade. That's what they have, the data that says no.
I thought of one more. It's less of a comment or question, I guess, and just kind of a for your information type of item. I attended a presentation from a company that does designs of well drilling, and interestingly enough, in their presentation, they brought up Portland lime cement, and they're talking about filling the interstitial spaces between the well casing and the well drill. They've got to fill that with concrete to prevent water migration from one zone to another. And they actually brought up Portland lime cement as a concern, not knowing whether it'll have shrinkage or cracking or different things and perform the same way that the other commonly used type 2 or type 5 cement concrete would for these wells. And I mean, that was something they just volunteered in this presentation. And I mentioned, hey, by the way, this is a case in MAG and it's going to become more common. But so there's a perception out there there's people in the industry that are aware of this Portland lime cement, but still have questions about how it performs. And I think that's probably common with any new product, of course.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to mention that I did hear that in a presentation just this past week.
No, I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. Again, as anything new, we have, 100 years of experience with ASTM C150 type 2 cement, type 1 cement. We don't have that with products. So it's gonna take time before everybody has worked through their mix designs and their various applications and so on will be comfortable with it. But it is something that's coming our direction, and I think we need to be prepared for it, at least have it in our specifications. And as these products then become available, we'll have to go through the mix design process. We'll have to go through all the other things that are in 725 that we have to meet. We'll have to make sure that those quality levels are maintained.
Okay, thank you. If there's no final questions, comments on this case, we'll give just a second for anyone that might have something.
I had a question, Jeff. Does anyone ever ask for a type of concrete like Class A or whatever without specifying a mixed design? And if so, what default would you use?
Well, all of the ready mix producers have standard mix designs. And as you guys recognize, we've gone to a 2-year submittal process for pre-approvals for most of the agencies. The EVAC goes through that process. City of Mesa goes through that process. City of Phoenix goes through that process. Many of the other cities then utilize those lists, those pre-approved lists of mix designs to use. Most of the time when someone's asking for that kind of a thing, they're getting a pre-approved mixed number that has a mixed design that's associated with it, or a code, or they are actually getting a copy of the mixed design as part of the submittal process to approve the mix. So yes, I would say that on some small projects, hey, I need a mag A for 10 yards of sidewalk replacement or whatever like this. But most of the time, if it's within one of the cities, it's already some sort of gone through a pre-approved mix design. But it's pretty transparent on what's in the contract.
But the plans and specifications don't state which mix design to use. They'll specify the class A, Class B concrete, and that's it. And then really it's dependent on the contractor to identify which concrete mix design they're proposing. And theoretically, at least for Mesa, we encourage them to use the pre-approved products list because it makes the review and approval simpler.
Sure.
But they're not necessarily obligated to use that. They could always submit something different, in which case we review that versus the specifications. But it's not typical for a plan or specification to identify a specific mix. Okay, anything else? All right, let's move on to agenda item 8, case number 23-03, revised section 710, asphalt concrete. And again, we'll turn this over to Jeff. This is a new case, so he can go ahead and introduce it for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have had these items have been discussed in the working group over the last couple of months. I have with me today Alex Carter from Vulcan, and certainly Mr. Gronenberg is here also. I'm not the asphalt expert. I'm going to turn it over to one of them to walk through the case and on reasoning and so on and so forth.
Yeah, what we did is we put some proposed language in regarding mix designs or the necessity for a new mix design if there's a small change to an asphalt mix, particularly pertaining to asphalt binder and or admixtures. This would not apply to aggregate changes or pit changes, of course. We have had several instances in the past year or two where we've had some supply issues with a given vendor of material. So this would be to propose a checkpoint to be produced rather than a complete mix design for a like change, i.e. 70-10 X supplier to Y supplier or lime X supplier to Y supplier. Even as we sit here today, last week, we were informed about one of our admixture suppliers having to go down for some maintenance, which if it had spread out any longer than it is, would cause us to have some significant challenges in supply. This is an ongoing issue that's become something as we've done more and more work. Just something we're looking as an opportunity to better serve the market and what I got.
And I'll just add on to that a little bit. One point verifications for those two have seen next to zero. If there is a slight variations, it's talking about rounding in some of the volumetric properties at the most. Sometimes it doesn't even, most of the time it doesn't even get there. There are a number of agencies that are accepting 1 point check verifications are currently. EVAC does that. We do the first full-blown design, and then as a backup or so, just for, in Alex's point, just a binder supplier change, not a grade change, no other changes. We supply all that supplementary data as a checkpoint at the design values from the original design. And Phoenix has gone to doing that as well. And this is just something for, you know, if we had to go through and do a specific mix design for each possible binder supplier that we would have to go get, we'd end up doing 5, at least, well, probably close to 5 designs for each possible one that was ever possibly out there, and have to go through all the vetting of the process and everything else. And I know part of the reason why we switched to 2 years as it is on the verification, it's onerous on us to make all the knowns and blanks to supply to all the laboratories, that the agency laboratories for approval verification, that if we multiplied that times 5 would make it even. And besides, the data is there, and we have had, I know over the past 2 to 3 years, we have done these 1 point verifications with some specific agencies without issue. Right.
So again, I'm not totally familiar with this. Could you, the specification uses the words volumetric checkpoint, but can you explain what that means? Like, what's that? Is that a process? Is that a test? Is it paperwork? What is the volumetric checkpoint? In layman's terms.
It's a series of tests to show that the volumetric performance, the air voids in the mix, the bulk density and maximum theoretical density are still going to be consistent with the original mix design and within the design parameters of 710. The mix has to be within the design parameters. And I'm looking across to Craig because I know he's sitting there with the stack of them, and this would be huge right now.
Nothing to add there. That's really.
So what is that? How do you do that test? I mean, are you talking about lab samples still, or what does that mean?
No,
Tests?
it's lab batched and lab processed samples where we actually run full volumetric properties at the optimum binder content with the aggregates and with the new material. And then that test data would then be submitted along with the design.
So in theory, to go back, it's everything that's on the original design page, with the exception of one thing. In the design box itself, we have to do upper and lower limits. So there's usually 4 points. 4 points that are bracketed in there with the optimum, usually emboldened or something highlighting this is the actual design, so that the engineers can see the fluctuation in the volumetric properties associated with it for each one of those points. All we're doing is that this point has already been identified as the optimum binder content, and all of these, and then all the associated data that goes with that point is taking the other binder, mixing it as such, and running all the same tests and giving the data for that design point to match up to. So in theory, the emboldened one for the design itself matched up to the checkpoint for just the trade out in binder supplier.
Or add mixer, yeah.
Okay, so it's a simplified physical sampling and testing.
Correct.
To show that the slight modification in ingredient, if you will, like we're swapping out the General Mills binder for the Kirkland signature binder, but it's the same thing. And so we're
so there's a lot of cross buying for these mid-level refiners anyway, that they pretty much their supply chains are
someone slapped a
They're like
different
a
name
tree.
on it.
like a tree with no branches.
All right, yeah.
Somewhat linked together, right?
Okay, thank you for clarifying for me. Again, opening up to the committee for questions, comments. I'm always willing to ask those questions so you guys don't have to, but please, if you have questions, let's hear them.
So again, this is Jim Badowich. So what are the changes if the contractor requests a different oil or is it different oil content? If you could redo that, retalk that.
So so Jim, if a particular mix design is done with the 70-10 binder from supplier X, supplier X is run out or is unable to supply. Rail cars were a big one last year that almost caused us major problems. Thanks for that too, Jeff. Says it's not going away. Anyway, so supposedly the problem's supposed to be coming back. Anyway, so it's swapping supplier X's binder for supplier Y's of the exact same grade and running the checkpoint against the original mix design target value.
All right, so it's just, okay, so it's just a different supplier on the oil and that's it.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Or add mixtures,
Oh, okay.
but not aggregate. Just binder or add mixtures essentially.
Correct, only those two, so that your TSR strengths, that would go into there too, because that's barely on the bottom there in the mix design. If you scroll up just a hair, there's where your wets and dries and your ratios come back in, and you have to meet all those too. And that's usually a function of the admixture more so than the, combination of the two.
All right, the PG grade's got to be the same.
Yes, no aggregate changes.
And the PG grading has to be the same too.
PG grade changes, yep, same.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So each manufacturer still has to meet the ASTM standard that's there, which call it, and I'll really go generic, call it a Cheerios, call it a Kellogg's, or call it a General Mills. They all have to meet that. So their properties may be slightly different, but they are still within the parameters of the requirements. So if you don't like 2% milk in your Cheerios, you do a 1%, which is slightly different. Still milk.
Even closer than that. 'Cause
Yeah.
You're talking about a 1%. You're talking about one, correct.
Right.
It's more so Kroger versus Safeway than trying to break
Both
down to
still
2%,
2%
1%. Both still 2%.
The high level, I guess, comment is it's very, very close in terms of the material and the properties of the material.
Correct.
I say that just because I'm trying to understand the case. Just like everything else, it's hard to get. So if we have more options, it doesn't make it as hard.
But it also, so the thought is the first design has been vetted. If we have to go through and do a full blown design, and usually we're as asphalt producers, we're not usually given a lot of lead time on, oh, by the way, our rail cars got held up and you're going to have a problem. To try and get a design, especially when you got TSRs and some other things, it takes you a few days. If you hit it on the first checkpoint, and which you should, assuming, but to do a full blown design with another supplier and then get it into review, you're probably having oil again because it's 2 weeks later. But you run into those different scenarios. Whereas now you've got something that an agency has already approved, mixed code A, and now you have just a supplier change with a checkpoint supplementary, we like that word today, against mixed design A.
But shouldn't the supplier, the plant already have a mixed design maybe for each different oil type anyways, just to be prepared in case they have to switch it anyways?
We do for types, Jim, and all the different designs, but we don't usually do, that goes back to the original point. You're talking about doing 5 designs for each specific one and not knowing who you may or may not use, and then who reviews and approves all those. And then the agencies that actually take the knowns. Currently, right now, we're sending pallets of known materials to labs to be burned off. That makes that 5 pallets of material or 6. And that's part of the reason why agencies, the reviewing agency laboratories have come back and said, you know what, we're better with this 2 years. There's virtually no variation in that year to year, that the 2 year is fine because of the onerous, that it's an undertaking for them currently than to add 5 times to that.
All right. So is this just a cost saving suggestion or what else would it be?
Well, it is that because of the number of designs, but it's also a time saving thing under the circumstances. If it comes down to it and it can't be facilitated, then potentially the job gets pushed. So I suppose it's cost saving, but it's also logistics side of it.
Yeah, I know, but I guess I'm just suggesting that, given the industry the way it is, to me, that they should just take that into account and have all those design mixes done already, especially since you only got to do them every 2 years. And then, just to be in other words, anticipating the fluctuation that happens in the season we're in now.
So one of our challenges is currently we're processing approximately 350 designs a year for the state already. If we have one change in one product, that now becomes 700. And that all of a sudden becomes an exponential growth if you're going to try and be prepared for every possible eventuality.
All right, so I guess I understand the logistics of it now. So okay. All right.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, I know I haven't had a chance to talk with anyone at the city of Mesa. We have a pavement manager who I'm sure will be very interested in it. So I'll go back and get some feedback and set. Yeah, and no, I might have some different comments at a later time, and encourage all the committee members to do the same. Go back and talk to the other staff and have that reviewed.
And Mr. Chairman, again, the same scenario. If individual agencies have questions, to make sure that the clarifications are there, we'll be happy to continue to discuss it at the working group or provide individual clarifications back to agencies.
It's 1 point in your supplement.
All right. Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 9, case 23-04. Revised section 714 microsurfacing and 715 slurry seal. Again, this is a new case being proposed. This is our first month where we have this case on our agenda. So we'll go ahead and hear the presentation on this. And it sounds like, Alex, are you taking this one?
No, yes, section 714 and 715 are, slurry seal materials. One of the issues we've been having, I guess I should drop back and say, back in 2021, these specifically, I can almost say it, table 714.1 and 715.1, there was an additional column added that added production tolerances. And then there was an additional note to the table that was added to it also. So as happens periodically when we make these changes, we don't always envision how that actually works in the field. And now we're finding that there are problems in the field with these tight production tolerances. So the proposal is, and I'll let Alex explain to it a little bit more, is to basically go back to the way the standard used to be and remove those production tolerances back out of the tables.
So we went through this at the working group and kind of talked to several agencies about it and got their take. The challenge here and being the primary supplier, especially these sands, you can take type 2, for instance. There's an allowable deviation on the 200s in design of 5 to 15 is the allowable range. So if we run an average of 10, let's say, % passing right in the middle on a large stockpile, customer comes in and does their own mix design typically for their process. So they would come and get a sample, take it to an independent lab and get that design produced. Another customer Y comes in, gets another sample. You may have, again, this is a 50,000 plus ton stockpile of material. You may have somebody who, if our average is a 10, let's say right in the middle, somebody gets an 8 and somebody gets a 12 out of that stockpile would not at all be unheard of or typically problematic. However, now we have 2 different mix designs, one at an 8 and one at a 12, where the plus or minus is 2, and I can't possibly be in spec for both of those projects that are shipping simultaneously.
Which the original criteria.
Correct. Which, yeah, the original design criteria was really built around these. We did ask for or solicit any information regarding any failures that necessitated this. Nobody had any failures that were attributed to it. It didn't seem like anybody at the working group meeting had any issues going back to the table as it stands, and that's our proposal.
Correct, and nobody really didn't affect, this was Mo, and this could be wrong too, but his point was that 5 to 15 for the design should be your production really limits as well. It doesn't affect volumetrics like it does in an asphalt design to be able to narrow that down. So then, hence the case.
Okay, I'm gonna start again with a few questions here. So just for my understanding here, this section 714 in this table that we're talking about changes on is specific to micro surfacing aggregate, not pavement mixed designs or anything like that, just micro surfacing aggregate gradation.
714 is microsurfacing and 715 is slurry seal
And
aggregate.
715 is slurry seal. So these are more, I mean, while they are maintenance type of activities and do provide some type of longevity for the pavement, they're not necessarily the structural components of the asphalt where a gradation might have a bigger impact.
That is correct.
Okay. In the last example, I think I used the analogy of it's like swapping out the brand name on the product. In this case, it seems more akin to using large eggs instead of medium eggs and making brownies, where it might change the recipe a little bit. You might get a slightly different product in the end, but what I'm hearing is that those changes are small enough that it's really not noticeable or going to impact the quality of the end product.
Nobody's complained about the brownies.
All right. Okay.
And keep in mind too, Mr. Chairman, you still have to meet the gradational requirements. All we're really talking about is production control, those tighter production that we should have thought about better before we put those tight controls in there, especially for these type of products that have such a wide range of particle sizes in there, material sizes in it. And since they're made from rock, it's crushed stone that this material is. It has such a tendency to segregate that we have some of these issues.
Well, and additionally, it's not a blended product like asphalt where we have multiple constituents that are blended and we have that control. It's really one product, one file.
Okay, and I think that started to answer the question I was just going to ask, which is, I mean, we use aggregate in asphalt, but we're saying that we don't have the same issue. And I was going to ask why, but I'm hearing because it's multiple ingredients, you can blend it and get the control better than you can when it's a single product.
And usually, to Alex's point, he started off with the averaging. So usually when you crush a pile, you'll take the average so you know. So all of our data that we do, and I'm sure they do internally too, is you're always trying to move off the averages. You're looking for outliers from the original average. So if a guy comes in because they're not doing those slurry designs, pulls the scoop out of the side that was the 8, and the other side, may have a 12 right over here. He's not sure how he's getting that, but it certainly meets the specifications. He does it, and now there can no longer be a 10. Well, if the pile is made to be a 5 to 15, that can be a bit of a fluctuation. But if you're averaging 10, I get it. But now you're talking about 1% possibly causing something to be out. And I think your issues were generally around a 1 or 2% on that. They weren't like it was a 6 and we're arguing about a 15. It was more so because the product was an 11 and somebody had an 8 off the design.
What year did you say this was added to the specification?
21.
Well, that just kills my next question. I was going to ask who no, I was going to say that was before my time. I don't know anything about this. Who can remember why this was added in? But
and honestly, Mr. Chairman, that absolutely, and Alex did mention that we were trying to go back through and research. Why did we add this? What was the portent behind this? And yeah, I'm sorry. You're right. You're right, Craig. And it's like, well, we had this chart, we had this information on some of our other products, and we felt like you guys needed to have a production tolerance there. And it's like, okay, this is not the same kind of product. This is a different kind of product. We don't really need those products.
Yeah, I think they were just trying to tighten up the spec and maybe not everything was thought through on the production end, so.
I think that's exactly the case.
Any other questions, comments by committee members? Okay, great. Let's move on then. We'll be moving here to agenda item number 10, 23-05, revised detail 212, utility pothole repair. Again, this is a new case being presented for the first time. And it looks like this one's sponsored by Arvid. Arvid, are you online?
Yes, sir.
All right, you want to take us away on this one?
Yes, sir. Gordon is rolling through the brief description and then the proposed updating of MAG detail 212. I've written a little, if you can scroll up a little bit, I've written a little description there of why these recommendations are being presented after discussion with the MAG Water and Sewer Committee that we had last year and into this year. I would say the biggest challenge we've been encountering is when we're asked how we're going to be backfilling a pothole. If it's with native, the questions have been coming back. How do you get compaction testing? And you can't do compaction testing in an 8-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch, 16-inch, even a 24-inch hole. If you want to do accurate compaction testing, you have to basically excavate a 36 by 36-inch excavation. And if it's over 4 foot deep, then you have to shore it. And in these applications where we're potholing for either construction or design, and it's not known if those holes will ever be reopened, the agencies are wanting to have half-sack slurry. So with that being the case, the recommendation is that for the final backfill option, the material that would be used for final backfill would be the half-sack slurry, so that we can eliminate the concerns of sinking potholes and not have to deal with coming up with solutions that we can't do the compaction testing. And then with regards to the removal of the native soil from the temporary, I wrote out a little bit of a description there. We scroll back down, Gordon, to the detail for me. Thank you. So if you look under the temporary pothole repairs, ultimately agency must approve a temporary pothole backfill. We're recommending native soil be eliminated because oftentimes that hole may not be reopened for construction. So what we're seeing more and more use of in the temporary pothole is a flowable fill, which is just ABC and water mixed in a truck without any cement, and that allows for the product to go into the hole. And when it dries out, which it does relatively quickly, we all know that ABC is under water settling is very tightly compacted. It affords the ability to reopen that hole. Part of the struggle that we have is in the industry, we oftentimes have to go out and pothole an alignment. It's not known if that alignment is going to work until that data is gathered. That data is gathered, it's determined that part of the alignment works, part of it doesn't. We then have to go back out and pothole a new proposed alignment. That proposed new alignment works. And now you end up with situations where agencies are finding themselves with potholes that may not have been permanently backfilled with the half-sack CLSM. On the flip side of that, the challenge is we don't want to backfill every pothole with CLSM, because if we have an alignment that's good and it's close to construction, we want to backfill it with a flowable fill that can be removed. Because if we're crossing those utilities with a trenchless application, or even in an open cut application, you don't want to be trying to go through half-sack slurry to re-expose that existing utility to make sure it doesn't get damaged during the construction process. So all that being said, to the committee, if you'll just please review what is presented there and come back with comments and thoughts and suggestions from your agencies. I'd like to see us get this tightened up as long as everyone is agreed and on board as to the understanding of why we have MAG 212 to begin with. And ultimately MAG 212 is there so that when a pothole is completed, the final backfill is locking that in so that there's no subsidence. And ultimately we want to get there, but during the use of the procedure of the potholing itself, we don't want to prevent a hole from being reopened if it has to be reopened for construction. Thank you.
So Arvid, on the temporary pothole repairs where the note number 2 is struck out, native soil can be used for temporary repairs only. I didn't see right offhand, you mentioned a flowable fill. I didn't note right offhand where it calls out flowable fill in this detail.
It doesn't, Mr. Chairman, and if you can scroll back up again, Gordon, for us. So I felt, working with various agencies, it was better just to leave that to the note 1 that says it's up to the agency to determine what temporary backfill is acceptable, because every project is going to be different. If it's a situation where it's a design project and we don't know if this alignment is going to be approved or not, then most agencies are saying, fill it with half-sack slurry because you're probably going to move the alignment anyway, and I don't want to take a chance, and I don't even know if this project's going to go to construction. If it's potholing for a situation where you're going to be crossing with trenchless, we have a project in downtown Phoenix right now where we went in 3 weeks ago and potholed 7 utilities were crossing that parallel the light rail on Van Buren and Central. And when we met with the inspector and all the agencies and explained, we're going to pothole all these utilities, we're going to backfill them with native and cold patch them because we're going to need to reopen each of them again when we do the actual trenchless installation. But then once the trenchless installation is complete, we'll come back in and do the half-sack slurry and the permanent replacement of the coupon. The inspector said, I approve that because I don't want you trying to make another hole and trying to go through the half-sack slurry and risk damaging. So the reason for striking the native is because we felt it was better to leave it completely in your lap as an agency to determine on the circumstance what you will define as temporary based on the situation.
Okay, and I appreciate that additional explanation. It seems like it should specify that directly then. So like note 1 says agency must approve a temporary pothole backfill. Either we have a similar note, agency must approve of the backfill material, or add that to the note 1, something along those lines.
Okay. So right now we've got agency must approve a temporary pothole backfill. Should we just reword that and say agency must approve temporary pothole backfill material? Just add the word material.
Well, I think I like it separate. Agency must approve a temporary pothole. Oh, I see there's backfill already written there. I'm sorry.
Yes. No, that's okay. That's why we can change that around if you want. That's why I wanted to have the discussion with the board, was because, and I wanted you guys to think about it, because maybe there is a little bit of a rewording of the temporary notes that needs to be done to make sure you're all satisfied with the way it's worded.
Yeah, when I first read note 1, I missed the backfill word. I just saw agency must approve a temporary pothole.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I was like, shouldn't we also approve the backfill material? But that's what it already says. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, Arvid, this is Warren.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Hey, this is Warren. Just a thought on that now that I'm thinking about that, and what Ryan was saying is maybe just a little more description in that note 1. And the reason why it's where we're saying that agency must approve that temporary pothole backfill is because situations vary, as you've described, right? So maybe that would help clarify when someone's looking at this, what the intent is with that. You know, obviously we have to approve it, but it's because of those different situations, right?
Sure. So what if we said agency must approve the temporary backfill material?
Due to varying situations, I don't know. I'm just throwing that
No,
out.
yeah, I'm just saying, I'm just looking at note 1 and asking if we just changed up the wording, is there a different way to word it that you feel would be better understood and received? And while you're thinking about that, the way that the temporary pothole repair notes are listed is it starts with, in this case, agency must approve the backfill material of a temporary pothole. Number 2 would be a minimum of 4 inches of patching material is required. Number 3, temporary pothole repairs must be permanently repaired with a type A or B. Pavement repair is shown below by the completion of the project. And then which would be number 4, covering the potholes with plates smaller than those shown in detail 211 is not allowed. And that has to do with the whole pothole plates that were used that would be sucked out of the hole. If they're gonna use plates, which is another alternative, that they're typically milled in, and they're typically 4x6 plates now to make sure that there's not a chance of them coming out, especially if they're there for long term. So the logic behind the notes, the temporary pothole repair notes, is that it's basically a sequence of how things get done. But ultimately, we want to make sure that you as the agencies bless the temporary backfill material, because based on the circumstance, like you said, Warren, it might be that you say, no, I want half sack, or it might be, yeah, I understand the situation. You're going to be reopening this 2 or 3 times. Let's do dirt with cold patch and monitor it, or maybe you say, let's do a steel plate over each hole so that we can just pull the plate and not have to worry about sucking out the hole every time and then re-backfilling it. So that's where, again, I'm trying to put as much of the decision making in your court based on the situation. And I don't mean to go on here, but with like City of Phoenix, you go down to the counter and you walk in and you say, I have this project, I need to do 64 potholes. You have to get a permit for every 5 potholes that you do in the City of Phoenix. You show them a set of plans. They give you the permits. You go meet with the inspector that's assigned to you. And then that inspector, after they've gotten an understanding of the project, will determine which method is acceptable for that specific project, whether they're allowing temporary, or if it all just has to be half sectionary or flowable fill. That's something that we're seeing more of, is flowable fill for temporary.
Warren, was there more on that you wanted to talk about?
No, that definitely covers it. Thank you, Arvid. Thank you, Ryan.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this case?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, one quick comment. So yeah, I like the elimination of the native, because we had an example of this where we did some design potholes, and then, it was almost a year later, and we're out there, having to do a permanent because they were failing. And it's like, well, and the contractor was arguing that he used AB, and we said, well, we don't know. Is it native? We thought you used native. And so, it was a debate. And so we ended up, sucking it out anyways. And so by eliminating that, it just, then for sure that it's a reasonable fill or permanent fill. So that'll help that, because these design potholes can linger and you don't know what happened. So.
Okay, thank you for the additional feedback, Jim.
So yeah, that's just another reason why we're doing this. So thank you, Arvid.
Yeah, you're welcome. And as I read it through my head, I think I'm going to just throw this out there. Agency must approve temporary pothole backfilling material. I think that might be the language that we should throw on the table and see what people think of that.
Do we define anywhere what temporary means?
We don't in this, because again, agencies, when you go into different agencies, depending on what you're pulling a pothole permit before, and most agencies have this now in their system where you can go in and submit a request, a set of prints to do potholing, especially if it's for design. And then they'll tell you, typically in those situations, where the temporary comes into play more so than anything is not in the whole design side of a project, but it's in the at construction point. And in particular, if you're going to see potholing done out in advance of a 16-inch water line, for example, oftentimes that's going to be done within a traffic control closure, or it's going to be done within 2 or 3 days of that traffic control closure approaching those temporary potholes. Where you get the extended draw out, like I said earlier, is in the trenchless applications. And it doesn't matter the methodology, tunneling, auger, pipe bursting, whatever, directional drilling. You've got to go in and find everything before you even move in and set up to do the trenchless application, because you don't want to do anything with the setup until you verify that the window that you're going to be boring through is clear. So that's where we're seeing a longer stretch out of the word of the temporary.
So I guess where I was going with that is yes, there's potholing done, you know, for a multitude of reasons. But the important part is securing the pavement for public use.
Correct.
If it's less than, I don't, you know, I'm just going to throw out a number. If it's less than 4 months, that's probably temporary. Beyond that, well, it's
no,
not.
that's fair. I mean, that's fair. So I'll say it this way. When we go down to the city of Phoenix, and like I said, they give you a permit for up to 5 potholes. So if we have a project that's got 20 potholes on it, we have to pull 4 permits. Each permit requires a $500 bond. So I'm in communication with my customers saying to them, just so you understand, I'm going to be putting this money down. This job will not linger because I've got money tied up with the city and they won't give it back to me until the inspector signs off that the permanent pothole repair has been completed. That is one way that we've been working with agencies to get the confirmation that the potholing does get wrapped up and it's not left in a temporary mode. The example I used, it's here in Central, we're in construction now. So we're going to be moving in next week to start doing the operation. And I know for a fact, and we wouldn't do it any other way, but I know for a fact the inspector is not going to let us walk off the job until he sees those potholes repaired with the cords. But he knows that we're going to do it because we've already walked that through our job walkout plan.
Okay.
That's it, $500, that's all?
Every agency is different. I mean, it adds up pretty quickly. We've got thousands of dollars sitting down there at the city of Phoenix. So some of these projects we do for Southwest Gas, there are 200 or 300 holes. And so we have to go down and pull all those permits and then put down a bond. And Southwest Gas knows that, and they give us the money to do that. And we have to, but ultimately we're pushing to get it back because it's just sitting down there making interest for the city. Not much, but it is interest.
Okay.
So it's just an idea for you as the agencies to look at your processes by which you authorize or permit potholing. If there was more of a uniformity across that, of course, then it would be more standard that the responsibility to prove that the hole is permanently backfilled properly, when there's money tied to it, contractors are going to pay a lot more attention.
Okay, thank you everyone for the comments on the case there. Arvid, thank you for your hard work on that.
My pleasure.
We'll go ahead and move on here to our next agenda item, which is agenda 11, item 11, case number 23-06, vegetated or rock bioswales. Again, this is a new case being presented this month for the first time. And this is one of the details we had alluded to earlier as we're talking about the outside of the right-of-way details and specifications, or our supplemental details and specifications. And so this one looks like we've got this sponsored by Bashir and Peter Kandaris. So I'm not sure if who wants to present this.
Hey, this is Bashir. Today, Eric is also here, and he would be presenting on behalf of the city.
Well, thank you, Bashir.
Go ahead, Eric.
Hello there, folks. The vegetated or rock bioswale is a detail that folks might know is from the Greater Phoenix lid handbook that's been reviewed and dissected a bit and updated within Peter Harris's outside of right away group. And the intent here, it's a bioswale, so with a vegetation or rock. So it's a, in the end, it's a swale. So stormwater flows into it. It flows generally from one side or from one direction to another, as swales typically do. There's the optional rock check dam there to to help slow down stormwater and allow the water to infiltrate. There's an optional perforated underdrain in this instance here. It allows any kind of standing water to be directed underground to either an infiltration trench or to a catch basin for generally for vector control. And we've recently had the use of one of these here in the city of Tempe, and there's a as well as a number in ASU, and these are used throughout the country in varying forms. So there is a set of specifications that go along with this, and they're presented there below. If you guys have had time to take a look, go ahead and let us know if there's any kind of questions or concerns or comments, and we can address them.
Okay, I've got a few comments, but I'd like to open it up to the committee first, if there's anyone else that has questions or comments.
I had a question on the detail. It refers to section 640.3.3 of the spec. So if this is going in outside right of way, and is this referring back to the section of our specs in the right of way? So are we mixing and matching here?
Yeah, it's a good question there. Obviously, our discussion here earlier in this meeting is hasn't been the first time that that was discussed. If you scroll down just a little bit, it's a 22 whatever on the detail number. So there's a question there on what these these items are going to be labeled. And the section 640 there is, is the current specification. So
These are new, these are new sections. These are not in the existing mag. This is the numbering problem we're coming up with. We threw numbers because we had to reference it for right now. But this is a brand new section. This doesn't exist in the existing mag. So as we develop and understand how we're going to do numbering, this we'll change the number around to fit the new outside right of way types. But yeah, this is not an existing mag spec we are referencing.
That's right. I think we just stopped at 631 or something like that, if I remember.
Yeah, you'll see two new sections in here. They do reference back to existing mag materials. The attempt was to not create new or duplicate specifications. So you see in there that it'll reference like a filter blanket material. It'll reference the landscape materials that are in there before the geotextiles. Those are all existing sections. So part of this is going to be the challenge of figuring out how do we number these ones that still reference back to the other existing standards.
Yeah, that is a challenge, Peter. Obviously, there are certain products and methods that can go in both the right of way and on site, but some really are really only applicable to on site. You know what I mean? And even that perforated pipe, something like that. Well, maybe it is, traffic ready or whatever, but maybe it's not. So things like that, we have to be careful of what we make universal.
Exactly. So I think some of the numbering we're going to have to look at is if we have a section 640, whatever prefix we put on front of it, that will have a prefix. But the intent was to, and probably won't even be 640. It may be however we want to number it, but there'd be a prefix but a 600 series, which would still agree with the existing standards, where the 600 series deal with these types of materials. So that is, again, it's our challenge we're going to have with coming up with this.
There is some existing mag specifications on the detail that it refers to, like for the landscaping or seating and 430.
Yeah.
So just like on this draft specification, it probably should refer to the mag specifications or some way to know that it's referring back to the main blue book and not the supplement book.
Yeah, as we develop this, we're going to have to come up with, maybe we'll be using that term instead of mag specification, mag supplement specification 1-640 or however we're going to do that.
So one of the concerns that I've had in past about adding a lot of details to the mag specifications and details, especially when it comes to some of these details that are associated with low impact development, is not that I don't like the detail, but to me, a lot of times these details have a lot of information, which to me, I feel are site specific or design specific. And so like looking at this particular detail for vegetated or rock bioswales, I look at things like the 9-inch minimum water surface elevation depth. And to me, I'm not sure I know why it has to be 9 inches. Why can't it be 6 inches or 3 inches? Wouldn't that depend on my site? Wouldn't it depend on the drainage area or how big of an area I have available? And different elements like that, the 6-inch perforated underdrain pipe, which is shown as optional. Why is it 6? Why isn't it 8 or 4? Or one of those other things, a reasonable alternate, or the 12-inch gravel envelope and the 4-to-1 side slopes. These are all design elements to me that could vary significantly from one site to the next. And again, I'm not suggesting that we don't have a detail, because I think having a detail is great because it provides context and ideas that can be implemented. But I do feel like we should avoid using the word standard details, because I'm not sure it is standard. I think it will vary quite a bit, but maybe alternate wording such as we've talked about already, supplemental details or typical details, complementary details, something along those lines instead of using the word standard detail. Because I feel like in this case, a lot of those variables may be site and case specific and dependent, whereas in our standard details, they're really, for the most part, they're not. Oftentimes it is exactly what it is and it's always going to be the same, but there seems to be a lot more variability in these. So that's just kind of one of my thoughts on how we go about these details. If we're going to provide that type of information, I definitely don't like calling it a standard detail.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Ryan. It's we always talk about that. It's sometimes it's a guideline detail versus a construction detail, right?
I mean, it could be a construction detail, but one that gets changed quite a bit based on the case. Like, you know, if the 9 I'm going to go back to the 9-inch minimum, and that looks like it's referencing water surface elevation, but I mean that's completely dependent on the size of the basin, the size of the area that drains to it, the size of the storm, and so again, maybe it's common, or maybe it's typical, or maybe it's preferred, but I'm not sure that's ever going to be standard, and that's just one example.
Yeah, and I think you've hit a key point when we went through this a number of times. That actually has to do with the check dam, not the basin itself. And so at one point we talked about even having the check dam as a separate detail, because it does get a little confusing. And just like you just said right now, it's really dealing with the way the check dams are designed. It's dealing with a minimum going over the check dam. The same thing with when you see the rock check dam materials, those are based on a standard typical design that has been used probably across the country, but the design became intrinsic within the feature itself. Not that you couldn't build it differently, it's just what they've been doing place in and place out. So it does become, it's interesting, the discussion to call it less a standard detail, more of a typical detail.
Yeah, and I think again that goes back to what we call the whole document itself, and how do we refer to these details, and how do we differentiate between, as Gordon referred to it, the blue book or the standard details we've always had versus other ones. While designers are always welcome to put their own modifications to a MAG standard detail, and that happens from time to time, it's pretty uncommon, but I think it could be implemented much more frequently on some of these other details. Any other comments from committee members on this?
You make a good point, Ryan, especially if some of these details are used by the development community. They always try to make things fit on their site, and they're sometimes very unique in what they do.
Yeah, and especially a detail like this, there's no reason it has to be straight. Obviously, it could meander. That's why there's no dimensioning shown on this, because there's no standard dimension to something like this. So I think we appreciate, this is why we wanted to get one of these in front of everybody, to start broadening the perspective of what we've been looking at versus what you're thinking of in terms of other standards and how we need to approach this. We needed to get one of these out here so we can start the process. The same goes with the language in the sections that were developed. We need the feedback as much as anything else.
Hey, Peter, maybe on those same lines in that narrative, in the front there, you may be some description of these details in that line of some of these are specifically truly construction details. Some of them are somewhat of a hybrid between a construction detail and a guideline or a typical, you know what I mean? Something like that might be helpful too.
So I'm writing that, what you're saying down right away. I like some of the discussion here.
Okay. Anything else on this one?
Yeah, just a little additional kind of discussion on this. So, so the with these details, this one in particular and other lid details, it's what you're saying, kind of lends to what you're saying is that kind of standardizing what each type of low impact development detail is and the types of uses. So this one's called a bioswale. One of the interesting kind of comments and everything else, that came from our engineer who was utilizing this was, they were initially trying to install a retention area, and there's, well, what does it matter what we call it? Is it a bioswale or is it a retention area? So it one more kind of use of these is to help inform the engineers and the designers of the proper use and terminology of these low impact development facilities. So there's more dialogue there.
Okay, thank you for the additional comments there. If there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and continue on in our agenda. And that takes us to agenda item number 12, potential new cases for 2023. We often hear about these in our working group reports, but if there's any other potential new cases that won't be part of working group reports, let's go ahead and hear those now, if anyone has one they'd like to bring up.
Hey, Gordon, it's okay to share the tracer wire detail if you would like, just as a kind of a, there you go. Okay.
Okay, Warren, are you gonna?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of share kind of the current direction for this case that we can submit now as a case, or I can submit a more official case coming in April. Based on our discussion at the water and sewer, it sounded like we wanted to expand this a little bit to include not just the trench and the locator wire and the tape, but maybe also to include some scenarios about how to address the tracer wire and the valve box, fire hydrants, riser detail, and then also a page 2 of this that would show the wire connections themselves, which I know in Chandler, our Chandler details do have the page 1 scenarios and for manholes as well, but we don't have anything like this for the tracer wire connections. So just thought I'd just open it up to the group if there's any other supplements that you have out there or anything else that you think would make sense to incorporate into this case that might help you. Let me know, and if you have any supplements or details that But that's the current direction. And if this seems like the right way to go for this case, that's kind of where we're at now.
Okay, thank you. And Warren, when do you think you're going to present this case?
Like I said, we can make it an official case today, but officially I'll put it together in a memo by for the April meeting.
Okay, fantastic. Is this tracer wire and ID tape installation, is this specific to like PVC water lines or anything in particular?
Any material, it applies for any material, any pipe materials.
Okay. All right, thank you. We'll look forward to seeing that case and hearing more about it in our coming April meeting then.
Okay, thank you, Ryan.
Okay, let's go to agenda item number 13, our working group reports. And we'll go ahead and go in the order listed here and start with our water and sewer working group. Jim, as the chair, do you want to take us through that?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. So we met on Tuesday, February 21st. It was virtual and in person. It was just me and Gordon hanging out. So, but it was a good meeting. We covered some of the items that were already discussed today, so I'm not going to go in detail. We didn't have any suggestions for miscellaneous corrections. We talked about the detail 212 that Arvid worked on. So you see the results of that he discussed earlier. We had a update on the PEX-A pipe materials. This may be a future case here, hopefully this year, about submitting, an alternate to copper services, is using PEX, which is used pretty much exclusively now, or most commonly used private side. So, there's a few things to hammer out on that. One of the things is I got traceability of it. So, I'd like to see a fact, a component that it can be traceable. So that's ongoing. And then we had a very interesting discussion on the expansion and clarification of sewer video testing and mandrel testing. I don't know, Gordon, I didn't get the minute meeting notes yet, but do you recall that gentleman's name that was there?
I don't recall his name off the top of my head.
Jeremy, I'm sorry, not Jeremy, sorry, I apologize.
I don't know, I'll call him the professor for now, because that's what it seemed like, so.
With the
But
American Cement Association.
yeah, I think he's worked in various fields in the industry, like clay pipe and stuff like that, but yeah, he was online and he had, we talked about mandrels, and it kind of really had an aha moment. And I know it was eye-opening for me and most of the people that were online, but the whole thing about mandrels, I guess what he showed us is that a lot of the mandrels that are used in the industry now are probably not measuring the 5% deflection. He had an example of a squashed pipe that you could visually see was definitely deformed and had deflection, and he took the common 8-inch mandrel and just passed it right through. So the summary, just to summarize quickly, is that it looks like the current mandrels in the industry are not measuring 5%. It could be closer to 7 to 10%. So we may want to look at, that's why we're looking into that further. And he kind of got into, there you go, there's kind of the science of this. There's discussion about, you got, the legs, I guess they call it, you get into the science of, and geography, not geography, what do you call it? Geometrics of a circle versus this. And, technically this is not a true circle. Especially when you got odd numbered legs. As you can see, the top fin, and then you go straight down from it, and then you got it split to two. So you got a triangle there, and that triangle does not match the dimension of the nominal dimension of the mandrel. So it was very eye-opening. So again, like in modern science, more data points on anything is good, and so it turns out that a mandrel with more legs, say like 18, an even number, and more of them, say like 18, is going to give you a lot more accuracy on when you mandrel a pipe. So we're going to try to expand this and maybe come up with a spec that might probably, might change the type of mandrel we're using currently, because it was obvious, at least from what he presented to us, that the current mandrels are not measuring, the 5%. They're passing right through. So, if your pipe is deflected like what you see there, so. And then we had discussion on Warren's case on the locator wire and tracer tape. And then I wanted to talk more about the C909. It's PVC's O. I kind of maybe want a head count from any straw vote, whatever you want to call it, from any industry, any other agencies. Or is anybody using the C909 pipe for water in the valley? I understand that I think it's I don't know if Gilbert is, but one of the other East Valley cities are using this. And again, this comes down to the supply thing. It's when the PVC pipe was hard to get, this seemed to be more available. So I'd like to maybe, explore this further and then see about adding an alternate material for allowing C909, because it meets, AWA, it meets all the specs. It's just a different kind of composite of PVC. I guess it's used more in seismic areas. That's maybe why it's used in California. But anyways, I like to explore maybe adding that in a case to mag. So, and that was about it. So our next meeting is this month, March 21st at 1:30, and again, it'll be a hybrid meeting, virtual and in person if you want to come down. So that was it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to our asphalt materials and concrete working groups. And who wants to? Jeff again? Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Our last meeting was on February 16th. You have information in your packet on it. We discussed obviously the cases that we brought today. There was no discussion on the case 22-15 holdover case from last year. One of the things that a couple of new business items that are of interest, particularly we had a conversation about, we've been strictly virtual at this point. So we had the conversation about going hybrid, and I think the consensus was that we need to get back to start seeing each other and meeting again and so on. Unfortunately, the ARPA space that we meet in was committed for the next meeting, which was March 16th. So we'll have one more virtual meeting, and then the April meeting on the 20th, we'll go to hybrid, and we'll encourage everybody to come down and meet in person at the ARPA offices again, like we did 3 years ago, 2 years ago, however long ago.
All right, thank you. And then outside right-of-way working group. Peter?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate we've gone through, I think, a lot of this already. I'll just do a quick summary of some of the other cases we've got coming up. We've got the spillway detail. That's that connection between the street and the silt basin that we had before. Eric's provided some details, and we're going to be getting some help on drafting those up. I think the next meeting on the 16th, we'll probably have a rough draft to look at. Keith was not available in the last one to present, but he's working with the vendors and with on the different options for detention tank, the criteria for construction. So that's going forward. I've done a quick look at the dry well, primarily the dry wells, and have kind of a combination of what other people are doing. I think we got some good input on that. So those are coming down the pipe on what we're working on. The thermoplastic body PVC catch basin, I think we talked about that in more detail at our last meeting of this committee, and it sounded like it was something we could start moving forward with. So that one will move up from the other discussions to an active case now. Some of the other ones that we're looking for some sponsors on. would be the stormwater basins. I went down the list prior of infiltration trenches probably being the more primary one because it deals with more of those items. So we're continuing to develop the cases. I assume we will be looking at presenting some before this season's session is over with. And our next meeting is also on March 16th. Similar thing we talked about going both virtual and in person. I actually have to be out of town that day, so I'm going to have to do it virtually. So I think we'll probably look at the April one where we'll do getting back to in person and have the virtual option. Any questions? I can answer those. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And moving on to agenda item number 14, general discussion. This is an opportunity for the committee to discuss any topics of interest relating to the specifications, construction practices, technologies, or anything else that we haven't had on our agenda today. Is there any general discussion items? Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 15, staff report. And Gordon will ask you to take some time here. And if you don't mind touching on vice chair again, I'd appreciate it as part of this agenda item. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Yeah, the first thing is we're still looking for a vice chair. We're going to start calling names if you so be on the, I'm sure people are going to be looking for my number and refusing to answer the call for the next month. But seriously, we would like someone to kind of fill in as vice chair, and there's not much to it. And even as chair, I think most previous chairs will say that, it's been a good experience and it's not a giant time sink. But anyway, so consider the vice chair or chair position. The other thing I wanted to touch on real quick, I know we're running long, is that we did have G Fiber, which is Google Fiber, meet with several people here at MEG, including myself and our regional community network person who does fiber. And of course, this is the micro trenching issue again. And they were talking about the project that they're working on with Mesa now and the specifications and how that process is going. And they're very excited about being able to do it, and they want to expand it as quickly as possible, as you can imagine, and was asking how that might happen at MEG and what our standard process is in our committee. So kind of talked a little bit about that. I think they went away feeling maybe a little disappointed that it wasn't going to happen immediately, but that, basically I was describing that we're looking for some of the communities like Mesa to try it out and see how it works. And if it does, then they may, one of the communities may sponsor it in MEG and kind of standardize it across the region. But I think most communities are kind of at a wait and see position until they learn more about how it works in some of these pilot communities. And that's about all I had on that. But just the micro trenching is still going to be an issue. We keep hearing about it all the time.
And just for reference, Mesa created our standard details last year, and we are already modifying those this year. So we're learning as we go. We'll move on to agenda item number 16, requests for any future agenda items. If there are any future items that people would like to request, now's the time to do so. And I'm going to combine this with agenda item number 17, any comments from the committee. So we'll open it up to both those items at this time. Okay, hearing none, then we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you very much for attending today.
Goodbye, y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. You can see them there. I'll take care of them.
I'm out. I'm done.